If someone stole your bank card and used it to withdraw money from your account before you'd had a chance to realise it was gone, you'd presume you're entitled to get your money back, wouldn't you?
Imagine if the bank said no. Imagine if they told you it was your fault, that you'd been negligent, that the only way someone could take your money is if you'd given them your PIN number.
That's exactly what happened to Suzanne Lewis. While she was on holiday in Devon, someone else was using her card to take money from cash points in London. It seemed like an open and shut case.
In total, there was £1,400 withdrawn from 6 transactions over a period of 3 or 4 days. I wasn't even in the area. I don't even know these cash machines. I didn't think there would even be any question mark about the loss of the money.
But Barclays refused to pay out. Because her PIN number had been used, they decided that she must either have written it down or shown it to someone else. But Suzanne is adamant this wasn't the case.
I just couldn't believe it. Total and utter disbelief. And what more can you say to these people? You're not even in the area. You tell them that you haven't given your PIN number to anybody. What more can you say to them to make them believe you?
This is a chip and PIN card. The UK switched them a year ago. They were supposed to make our transactions more secure. The irony is that when things do go wrong, it now looks like we're less protected than we were before.
In the days when proving that you'd authorised a transaction involved producing a piece of paper with your signature on, it was relatively easy for everyone to know whether you'd authorised it or not. The banks have introduced a system with a PIN which simply takes that clear proof away.
In the past, if your signature had been forged, by law the banks had to pay out. But there is no law to cover PIN transactions. The only thing protecting the consumer is the banking code, a voluntary code of practice that all banks are signed up to.
The banking code says it's up to the banks to prove that you've been negligent. If they can't, then they have to give you your money back. But that's not what's been happening. Since chip and PIN came in, it's up to you to prove that you've done nothing wrong.
Betty Tanner was in London when her card was stolen and £2,000 taken from her Alliance and Leicester account.
Apparently they'd spent the money on an upmarket jewellers, and I felt devastated. I went into the bank and I asked them what I was going to do about my bills. And the young lady shrugged her shoulders and said, "Poor you, you'll have to have an overdraft." I've never been in debt in my life, ever. Never owed anybody anything.
Alliance and Leicester refused to reimburse her. She appealed to the Financial Ombudsman.
The Ombudsman said he felt that because a PIN number had been used, that I was negligent, and he found for the bank. I don't know how they came to this decision of not reimbursing me, because I have never used my card in an ATM, ever, and I have never written it down, and I have never given it to anybody else.
The reason the banks take such a hard line is because they assume chip and PIN is unbreakable. But the banks are wrong. We know of at least one way that chip and PIN can be vulnerable.
These Cambridge University researchers, Stephen and Saar, are about to show us that they can access chip and PIN information from somebody else's card. Here's the victim, one of our team about to pay for his lunch. It's going to prove very expensive. In a bookshop a few doors down the road, Stephen is waiting to hijack his chip and PIN details. He'll be using a fake card linked to a computer hidden in this backpack. Stephen has an accomplice. Saar is working in the cafe where he's tampered with the chip and PIN machine. Instead of sending information to the bank, card details will be sent wirelessly to the computer in the backpack instead.
Got a customer.
Ready to go, Saar tips off Stephen in the bookshop, who's in position to make his own purchase. It's more expensive, but he doesn't plan to use his own money. The customer in the cafe keys in his PIN to pay his £5 bill. As he does so, his chip and PIN details are automatically sent to Stephen in the bookshop.
PIN is 8046.
He enters the hijacked PIN to buy his books. It's all gone through. Both the chip and the PIN have been read by the terminal in the bookshop. The victim in the cafe thinks he spent £5. In fact, his card has been charged £50, but he won't be able to prove he didn't spend it.
So, Stephen, what has just happened?
I've just bought £50 of goods with this fake card, but the money has actually come off someone else's card in a different location. The transaction was verified with the chip and the PIN, and that's going to show up on our victim statement. This shows that the hard line that the banks are taking on victims of fraud is not fair. There is no such thing as a 100% secure system, and chip and pin is not an exception to this rule.
And if chip and pin is not 100% secure, then the bank should not be turning down compensation claims from its customers on the basis that the system cannot be beaten.
It seems that when a customer rejects a transaction, the bank's first response is really quite cursory. It looks to see if the pin was used, and if it was, it says it must be the customer's fault, without considering any of the other possibilities, and I think that is quite monstrous.
I think they should have given me the benefit of the doubt, reimbursed me enough to pay my bills, and if at the end of the day they found I'd been negligent, which I know they won't, then I would reimburse them back.
I just felt it was a personal affront to my integrity because they obviously didn't believe me, and I felt powerless to prove otherwise.
None of our cases know how their money was stolen, nor do the banks. But that hasn't stopped them ignoring their own banking code and making the customers pay out. No wonder some of them feel as if they've been robbed twice. Well, after we got in touch, Barclays have refunded Suzanne Lewis her £1,400. They say that's because we provided extra details about the fraud which they hadn't previously known, though in fact we didn't tell them anything more than she had in the first place. But there's no such joy for pensioner Betty Tanner, the other case in our film. The Alliance and Leicester are sticking to their decision not to give her her money.
Sandra Quinn from Apax joins us. Apax speak for the banks on chip and pin. Sandra, clearly the banks are willfully ignoring their own code. They have moved the goalposts.
Well, the code has been the code for 15 years now. The burden of proof lies very clearly with the banks. And let's remember that we've been using PIN at cash machines for a long time before we used PIN with chip and pin. So the code has not changed in any way, and we wouldn't expect the banks to interpret it any differently.
But they are, aren't they? It says quite clearly the onus is on card providers to prove the customer has acted negligently rather than the other way around. That is not happening.
The issue is about how do you prove negligence. So you've got two very distinct instances. If somebody, a fraudster for example, saw my PIN and then got hold of it, that would be a fraudster. That wouldn't be negligent on myself, the cardholder's instance. However, if I'd copied my PIN down and left that in my handbag and my card was stolen.
These people haven't done that. So clearly it's not negligence, it's not fraud. Given what we've seen, what is your message to the banks?
Well, there's two messages here. One to the banks to say we're looking at how negligence can be proved, and the banking code is under review this year. That will be a key issue for the banking code review to look at. And one to cardholders and customers. One, obviously, to look after your PIN at all times. But two...
No, please. These people have done that. I want you to acknowledge the banks could do more and are not doing enough.
Well, the one thing that banks perhaps should be more upfront about is looking at the letter they write to their customers and telling them the kind of information they've looked at to prove their case.
Well, we saw what the Cambridge academics did. Now, they're very, very clever, clearly, but crooks are cleverer.
Crooks are clever, certainly. Fraudsters are clever. We've never said that chip and pin is infallible. What we very carefully said...
Well, some of the banks give that impression, don't they?
Well, chip and pin isn't infallible. No system, unfortunately, in this day and age is 100% secure. The key thing here is that if a customer feels they're a victim of fraud, they should go to their bank, and their bank should treat their case fairly.
OK, Sandra, thank you.
Thank you.